Welcome to Purple Space Cascade of Thoughts. Today we have with us a paragon of inspiration, someone who has fought disease and societal issues with abundance of energy. And she's also a disability advocate, she's a public speaker, and she's an author. I'm talking about none other than Melissa Shang. We're truly honored to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
First of all, let me just tell you that it feels so incredible to finally talk to someone who has the ability to start a revolution, to be the voice of change and to actually give people the faith, to believe in self and go after even the most impossible things. So I wanted to ask you, how did it all start? Like, how did you know that, your life is going to change? What was the exact point when you realized that?
Yeah. So I grew up with a disability, but it wasn't until I was 10 years old I started to make change. So essentially what had happened was I was obsessed with the American Girl doll company, a brand that sold dolls that came with stories about preteens ages 9 to 12 overcoming adversities or learning to bake or sing or knit or horseback riding. And so every year, American Girl came out with a new doll that had one of these stories. And I read every single one of them. I was obsessed for so many years. But then when I was 10 years old, the 2014 American Girl of the Year doll was another blonde dancer. And by this point, I was tired. I was tired of not seeing myself represented on the screen or in the books I read or in the media. And I wanted change. I didn't want to see another blonde dancer. We've already had a couple of these. I wanted to see a doll that was like me. So I reached out to my sister. I remember climbing into her room the next morning at 7 a.m., bright and early, and telling her, this is what happened. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? And together, we decided to start a petition for American Girl to release a doll with a disability. And at first, we expected the petition to get maybe 1,000, 2,000 signatures at most. But then I ended up getting over 140,000 signatures. We were shocked. It was featured in major news outlets like BuzzFeed, CBS, Cosmopolitan. People were telling us about how they had a brother or a sister or a neighbor or a friend with a disability, and that for the first time, they felt like they could understand them so much better. And so that was when I started activism, when I realized that I had a voice and that my voice mattered to make change. And so after that, American Girl contacted us and they told us that although they quote unquote appreciated our efforts, they couldn't guarantee that a doll would be made with a disability. And so at first we were frustrated, but I knew that I had a choice. I could either stop activism altogether because I was facing a rejection, or I could be like, no, I'm going to continue. And by that point, I realized that I could make a change. So I decided to continue. So I thought, well, the purpose of what I'm trying to achieve isn't the doll, right? It's the story itself, a story about a girl with a disability who is conquering it and who is having the same lives as everyone else. And so I decided to write my own book. The book, Mia Lee is Willing Through Middle School, was published when I was 13 in 2016 at the National Youth Transition Center in Washington, D.C. Mia Lee is Willing Through Middle School centers around a middle school girl called Mia Lee who's trying to run for video production club president against the middle school mean girl, while also having to make friends and learn to go through middle school with an aide beside her. She also has a disability, just like me. The purpose of Mia Lee was to show that although she had a disability, her disability did not define her, and that she could have the same middle school experience as everyone around her. And so, since then, I've continued to do activism, speaking at places such as the United Nations, doing a TEDx talk, and writing an article in the New York Times.
Wow, that is really inspiring. I think one of the key statements I would take from that is your disability does not define you. I think that was really inspiring what you said, because you identified with a problem you saw and you sought to change it. And I really respect that, Melissa. I really liked that you did that. Um, why don't we move to the next question, which is about your support system. Basically, you've talked about your sister a lot, and I even went through the website and I saw your sister, and she seems to have supported you in every single venture you have taken part in. And that was a really beautiful moment when I read through that. So could you please elaborate on that a little? Your sister, your family, and your support system. Like, how did they help you reach where you are?
My support system is definitely my family and friends. My sister is definitely one of the core people that I have in my life. Ever since I was young, I remember her advocating for me and teaching me how to advocate and teaching me to know that I was more than and I was worth more than, and I could fight against the ableism that surrounded my life. Like, for example, I remember a memory in which my third grade teacher didn't let me go on a field trip because I was in a wheelchair. And my sister called the school board and basically said, no, Melissa is going to go. And so from such a young age, my sister was teaching me to fight against discrimination and to fight for what I believed in. And then when I started doing that, she supported me the whole time. She led me through the processes of how to be an activist until I was able to manage it myself. So she's definitely been one of the biggest and most supportive people in my life. My parents are also super supportive, and my friends, who I can always go to when I'm frustrated or for encouragement. So I have a pretty good support system in my life, and I'm really grateful for that.
We see that, that the support that is there that you have is beautiful. It's great to see you have a great circle around you, because we always talk about who becomes successful, but there's a parade of people who are there standing by you always and motivating you and giving you the belief that you have in yourself. So I wanted to ask you that, why is it so important that everyone finds a voice and finds a representation in this world? Why is it important for everybody?
I think that growing up, because I didn't see myself surrounded in real life in my schools. I was maybe one or two of the only students with disabilities at school. And then because I didn't see myself represented in the books and the movies I watched or read, they were always about a disabled character, if they were represented, being shown as a side character, hoping to make the main character more strong or more courageous or more kind. Or they were, killed off under the belief that a life with disability is less worth living, which is super problematic. And so I think that representation is so important for, one, making students and kids with disabilities feel so much less alone and helping them to accept their disability. And two, to help people understand their disability a lot better. Because when stories about disability are only shown in such a negative light, people don't tend to understand what it's really like to have a disability. Ableism, internalized ableism and discrimination and stereotypes about disability are not born naturally. They're born starting at a young age from the people that you talk to and the stories that you read and watch. And so I think it's important for people to understand what it's really like to be disabled and to have a disability starting at a young age, which is how representation is super important for that.
Wow, I think when it comes to matters of disability, we need institutional change. And I think you're doing that really well, approaching people. And I think it started off when you wrote your first book. I think that gave people a new hope. You were able to connect with the people. And I think that's the first stage when it comes to solving a societal issue, changing people's perspective to things. Could you just give us a short summary of your book?
Oh, yes. Okay. So my summary of the book is of Mia Lee's only from middle school. There's a girl called Mia Lee. She's 12 years old and she's entering sixth grade, also known as middle school. And she has a best friend that she's known since elementary school, partially based off my friends. And she enters middle school not really knowing what to expect. She has an aide with her beside at all times. And she decides to run for video production club president because she loves making stop motion videos, which is videos where you move dolls or toys or objects around um, in small movements, and you take a photo of them every time so that when you put the photos together, it looks like the dolls are moving. So she loves making these videos, and so she decides to run for video production club president. And there she meets the certified middle school mean girl, who was super casually ableist to her. So she had to learn to stand up for herself and learn to make friends and become a leader as a girl with a disability.
That is so beautiful. I absolutely love this whole idea where there's so much representation, even in books and films, because that is so important for young girls when they're growing up to see themselves, like that happened with Moana, that happened with so many other characters from so many books. And gone are the days where it's just this blonde white girl who's just represented as this heroic figure. So it's really beautiful. Your initiative is all beautiful. And when I was reading about your book, and there was this one review that said the about the book was that a story about disability does not have to be sad, and that just made me feel so happy, because that is so important. We should not look at it as a form of just being sad, just feeling sympathy. They can be remarkable heroes too. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so like I said before, I feel like so many stories about disability are perceived as in a pitying light, as someone with
Yeah.
disability not being able to do anything or not being able to live a worthwhile life. And so people develop the stereotypes that disability is inherently pitiful, where when you're disabled, you're inherently helpless, where you can't have a life where you're successful, where you're homebound and can't be like doctors and teachers and nurses, and all of these jobs that supposedly normal people are doing. But in reality, that's not true. In reality, as someone with a disability, I know that I and so many others can live lives that we are very proud of and can do the jobs and go to classes and do things that everyone else can do, maybe just a little bit differently. So I think it's important for people to recognize that disability is not inherently a trap.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. I think that is yet again another thing we need to look up to. Disability is not something that's going to put you down. I think, what do you say? When it comes to fighting these problems and looking at them from a different light, I think that's more important than thinking of it as something that's going to waste your life. Um, but are you working on anything right now as a disability activist? Any new projects coming up? Anything along those lines?
I am, yeah. I'm currently working with the Boston Center for Independent Living, which is an organization in Boston helping to provide people with disabilities with skills that can help them live independently. To start a youth advocacy group set for people with disabilities, ages 14 to 25, because I feel like so many teens with disabilities face the same issues, such as lack of accessibility in public spaces, lack of accommodations offered in schools, lack of representation. But these issues are often so different from the issues that adults with disabilities tend to face. So teens are often isolated, feeling like they don't have a support system because the issues that they have are not necessarily the same issues that adults are tending to face. So my group is hoping to bring the issues that teens with disabilities face front and center and help advocate for them and educate people about them. So it's a youth-led group starting campaigns across Boston to bring our issues to the forefront of the conversation.
It is so beautiful to see you doing amazing work. So how does it feel to be this voice of change for young girls who look up to you, who are struggling just like you, who are facing similar kind of challenges? What message do you have for them?
I would say that society is going to tell them that they can't do anything, or they're going to try to bring them down. Or they're going to tell them that what they're experiencing isn't real, or they don't understand the full extent of the situation. But to not let that discourage them, and to tell them to keep fighting for change and what they believe in, and to have a healthy support system with them, and to learn methods of self-care and self-respect and self-confidence while they're making this change. So inherently, just to make the change that you want to see, and don't get discouraged.
That's a really beautiful message yet again, Melissa. Thank you so much. Um, you mentioned that you've been a TED Talk, you've given a TED Talk, and you've spoken at many conferences and committees. Well, how was that experience? Because so many people have a fear of public speaking, right? So how exactly did you approach that, and what message did you share with other people?
Um, I feel like public speaking is a daunting thing for many people because of issues like stage fright. For me, I've always been someone who's been super confident in my abilities. I remember ever since I was super young, my parents telling me that I was always like super positive and super like I knew what I wanted, and I knew that I was going to do anything that I could to get it. So very stubborn, very confident. And so it was never really an issue for me when I went into public speaking. And I mostly speak about issues surrounding representation, my activism, the need for change for people with disabilities, and social justice movements. Just the different issues that people with disabilities go through as well, surrounding representation, healthcare, housing, accessibility, all of these different issues that I feel like aren't typically talked about in feminism and social justice movements. So yeah.
It is really good because it's so inspiring to see you have so much of self-belief and this inner strength in you. I feel that is the key thing that has taken you so many places, because you believe in yourself. You find that strength within yourself. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges that you faced in this journey up until now, since when you started at 10 years of age?
I think that one of the biggest challenges that I faced in my activism journey was something that I wrote about in my New York Times article, which was when I started writing my book and sending it to different publishers, many of them didn't want to accept my book because they felt that it was quote unquote too happy. They wanted more conflict. They wanted to see people with disabilities struggling, or having friendship issues, or things that they expected people with disabilities to be facing in their lives. They didn't want a lighthearted story about a middle schooler with a disability, like just being a middle schooler. And a lot of these issues that they had with my book were born from stereotypes that people with disabilities must be struggling. So they didn't want to publish my book. But if we didn't want to change our book because we believe that the message that people with disabilities can be disabled and can still be normal and can still live normal and happy lives is super important. So we chose the self-publishing route, and with the help of a literary agent, we published our book through Amazon.
Raghav, you have something to say? I really liked your answer so much, because we're so used to putting people in a box and thinking of them just from that perspective. So that was really a very good answer.
Thank you.
Melissa, when you've talked about all of these societal issues you're tackling, and now let's look a little bit long distance. What impact do you want to leave in this world? What do you want to be known for? What do you want your legacy to be? Yeah.
That's a very good question. I think that what I want to leave is that I want to live a life that's going to empower people with disabilities in different ways, and tackle the issues that people with disabilities go through surrounding homelessness, unemployment, marriage inequality, um, employment, ableism in employment, and all of these different issues that people with disabilities are continuing to go through, but that no one really talks about because disability is not an issue that's centered in social justice movements. So I want to make these issues front and center in the movements that I'm in. And I want to continue to make change for people with disabilities. And my ideal life is a life where people with disabilities, students with disabilities, can grow up seeing themselves represented in the stories that they read and watch, getting the accommodations that they need in schools without having to fight tooth and nail for them, and growing up knowing that people are going to be accepting of their disability, and knowing that they're going to have the accommodations and the protocols that they need in society to live the life that they want to have, just like everyone else.
That is a very beautiful answer, firstly, and I'm just shocked at the level of maturity that you have at such a young age. You spoke about so many different issues and how you would want to bring a change to that. That is beautiful. So, we heard about you. We heard about your projects and your vision, everything. I just want to know who are you aside from all of this? Like, what kind of books you like to read? What keeps you going? What are your favorite memories about everything right now?
I do a lot of activism work, but aside from that, I think I'm just a normal teen. I love to read. I love to watch shows. I love to go shopping with my friends. I'm very stubborn, very sarcastic. My mom is not very happy with me when I go to bed at 2 a.m. and roll my eyes at her every couple of days. So I'm just a normal teen. I do things that I feel like every other teen does. I'm starting to go into the college application process and writing like my college essays, my Common App supplements. So that's been a really interesting process in quarantine. So overall, I'm just pretty normal.
When I from my seniors, I've heard that the Common App essays are one of the most difficult things to work on, because you keep rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and then you scrap the entire thing and you move on to something else. So any advice for someone like me, someone in like the next 2 years who are going to be going into college, how do we attack this Common App essay, the dreaded Common App essay?
I would say to I think this has been repeated, but I would say to just be passionate, show who you are in them, show like if there's like a specific issue that you're really passionate about, emphasize that, emphasize your passion, emphasize like the qualities about yourself that you feel like are best or are the most important to your character. Have like a powerful anecdote that's going to make your story shine. So my biggest piece of advice is to just be yourself and be genuine and be passionate.
Wow, that's good advice.
That is really, and I'm really inspired by your writing process as well. At such a young age, you came up with this concept, and you're like you wanna be vulnerable about it and be open about it, and you got your book published. So, what do you have to say for aspiring writers who are looking to get published?
I would say to make connections, befriend and reach out to, speak with activists who may have the connections that you need or who may have the careers that you're hoping to get. And just have a good system that you can reach out to whenever you want to get something published or whenever you need writing advice, so that you know, so that you don't have to struggle through the same process of where do I find people who are going to publish my story every time. The biggest thing that I think you should do is to start out researching and speaking with people who you know are going to help you first.
Um, I actually wanted to ask you about the concept of failure, right? Normally we see failure and it really hurts us, and we just stop everything we do. But I want to know more about how you deal with it. How do you deal with a challenge, an obstacle, or a failure? So, what is your process there?
I think that no one really reacts to failure well. I think that failure is inevitable in any job that you do, but like no one ever wants it to happen, and no one ever is super excited when a failure happens. I've definitely had my fair share of failures and rejections in my life, but I think ultimately what you this is like easier said than done. But I think like what you really need to do is accept it, accept that you might not have gotten into this, but move on and bring your I find that personally when you're upset about a failure, the thing that you're upset about is typically related to your passion. So change what your sadness to passion and continue to do the stuff that you really want to do and that you feel like are really important for you to do. And then apply to different things and then keep doing what you're doing. And failures will become less and less often, and you're going to keep persevering, because I feel like failures are really difficult for everyone, but what you really need to do is to not let that bring you down and not let that discourage you from doing what you really are passionate about and want to do with your life. That said, I'm hypocritical because I have also eaten a whole plate of ice cream every time I've gotten a failure, but that is the ideal.
I'm actually increasingly falling in love with your spirit and your inner strength and all of that. You also spoke about reading in your pastime. So, who are some of your favorite writers? What are some of your favorite lines that inspired you?
I don't have any specific lines, but my two favorite activists and writers are Alice Wong, who is a prominent disability activist in the San Francisco Bay Area, and who has been influential in bringing disability issues and disability stories to the light. And my other favorite activist is Claire Wineland, who was someone with cystic fibrosis, technically considered a terminal illness, who spoke really passionately about the concepts of death and living a life that you are proud of, and not letting stereotypes and the idea that just because you're disabled or just because you're ill, that you need to conform to what society has in plan for you. So those two activists I feel like have been super inspiring to my activism and to my processes.
Wow, I think viewers do give it a look, and if you find it interesting, then read some of the books she's recommended. I wanted to ask you, what are your hobbies? Do you read, write, or maybe cook? Anything you do for fun, really?
I love to read and I love to write, and I love to public speaking, and I like shopping, and I also like I like shopping, and I also like hanging out with my friends, watching TV shows. Some more productive than others, I will admit, but those are probably my primary hobbies. I also love singing.
Oh, I think TV shows is a must for us teenagers. Like, we need it, like, to pass time, honestly speaking.
Absolutely.
It is to see that you are so driven and you're passionate and you embrace life with open arms. So I feel like there are a lot of people who grew up with a lot of self-image and self-esteem issues. So what did your parents do right? What did your support system do right that you grew up believing in yourself and having the spirit?
That is a good question. I feel like so many parents of children with disabilities conform to the idea that because their children are disabled, that they're never going to amount to anything in life, that they're basically trapped in a system where they are never going to be able to live a life that they are proud of. And my parents have always pressured me to do better. They've never let me conform to the idea that just because I'm disabled, I shouldn't be held to the same standards of getting good grades and doing what I love. So my sisters, they've pretty much put me to the same standards as my able-bodied sister. And they've never let my disability become an excuse for why I can't do things. So I think I grew up with that structure of my parents never doubting my ability and never letting me to doubt my ability. So that's really empowered me to not doubt myself and become a lot more self-confident and empowered.
Wow. When it comes to being resilient and solving your problems, well, how important do you think is being resilient and having an optimistic mindset in all of that? Because you've talked about being optimistic a number of times. So how important is that? Like personally, how do you identify with, since I'm really happy and since I like everything I'm doing, I'm able to handle adversity much better than other people?
I feel like resilience is one of my biggest strengths because I've grown up having to learn to be resilient. I've grown up having to learn that some of the things in society just are not naturally built to consider me. So I've had to learn to do things differently, adaptive equipment, or writing in different, or using different tools to write, or those are like the minuscule things. But there's also like knowing that I'm not represented in the media, knowing that different movements are probably not going to consider measures for people with disabilities. So these are all things that society have done to exclude me. So I've had to learn to do things differently, from using adaptive tools to carrying the ableist society and system that we're living in now. So I've had to learn to be resilient, to do things differently, and to not conform to what was set for someone like me to do. So I think that resilience is super important if you're going to go into something like activism, because you're going to be making change and you're going to be facing rejections and failures and people who just won't listen to you. So it's important to be like, no, I won't back down just because this has happened to me. I'm going to continue to adapt and to see how I can do things differently until what I want to do actually works.
I really liked your answer, and I just had this thing that how does it feel to be a role model? Is it something that inspires you to go on with your day, or does that sometimes put a pressure on you that you have eyes on you and you have to be this perfect girl, you have to be inspiring all the time? So how does it feel to be a role model?
I think it's really sweet. I think it's great because I feel like I grew up not having any people with disabilities who I could look up to until I started activism. I grew up not seeing myself in the people that surrounded me. So I just kind of didn't know what people with disabilities were essentially capable of. And then when I started activism, I was introduced into the disability community, which is full of people who were disabled, who were in different parts of the world and still living lives that they were proud of and making change that I didn't even know was possible. And so I would be more than happy and more than thrilled to be one of these people for younger people with disabilities who were like me, thinking that they were alone and not knowing what they could do with their lives.
Wow. I mean, we wish to follow, we really need a role model so that we can look up to them, see what they've done, and try to imitate that so that we can overcome the adversities we face as well. So it's really cool that you are a role model for other young boys and girls who have faced disability, and you're just giving them hope, honestly, because I think that's something that everyone needs to push on in life. So I really like, that's something I really respect you for. Yeah. Now, besides forming a petition or reaching out to people, what would you recommend to bring about societal change? So would you try rallies, or would you try policy changes, anything different compared to what you're doing right now so that you can change people's perception on disability?
Well, I mean, I think that different people with disabilities are doing different things. Some are taking on governmental roles to bring change to legislation. Some are journalists writing about change in the media, such as like BuzzFeed News, the New York Times, Teen Vogue. Some are activists working to empower disabled stories, and some are founders of organizations hoping to combat disabled issues. So I think that everyone has their own strategy for bringing down societal ableism and empowering people with disabilities. So I don't think there's a set right or wrong way to do it. I think it's everyone's like personal choice and what your strengths are. And adding on to that point, I think that because it's so diverse and there are so many options, I think that so many people think that being an activist is like you have to meet these certain quotas or these certain criteria, when in reality, everyone has their own strengths, and whatever strengths you have, you can use that to bring on your own form of activism. So I think that anyone can really be an activist.
Wow.
I really like that you said that, we need to focus on what our strengths are, because we often, what we do is we love someone's work and we see that what they're doing and we try to just imitate it without any putting any thought into it. It's really important that you said that we need to focus on what strengths we have and use that to make a change. And I really want to ask you, when you do all of these things, what is the most rewarding factor that makes you feel, that, okay, fine, I'm on the right path? So what is the most rewarding thing out of this whole good work that you put out there?
I think the most rewarding thing is the support that I get. I feel like whenever I do something new or start a new project, I see people who are telling me continuously that they were inspired by me, whether I changed the perspective or that I helped them understand a loved one better because of what I did. And I think that those small comments, those small pieces of support that people give me are what empower me to keep going, because they help me realize that my work is not futile, even if it's not as big as I would possibly want it to be.
Okay. Um, Now I mean, we both are currently still in school, right? What changes would you want to bring about in the school system in your country? Because I'm pretty sure there would be some problems there against people who might be differently abled. So how would you go about talking to your school, the people who lead it, and the people who control education in your country? How would you go about fixing it?
A few things. Number one, disability history needs to be taught in schools. In my AP US history curriculum last year that I took, they talked about so many different issues and movements throughout history, but the disability rights movement was not included as any of them. And I think it's so important that it is, because this movement was what spurred change for people with disabilities and allowed people with disabilities to be at the spot in society that they are today. And learning about it can help people realize that people with disabilities can be just as powerful and as not necessarily helpless. So that's number one. Number two is to think about people with disabilities in your evacuation and your lockdown drills and practices. Number three is to invite students with disabilities into their IEP, individualized education plan meetings, starting at a young age. I remember that when I was 6 or 7 years old, starting school, I wasn't invited to my meetings. Only parents were allowed to go, and I was only invited when I was 12 or 13, which I think was super messed up, because I just don't like the idea of parents talking about what students should be doing or what things that students should be given in schools without the input and permission of students. And I think that joining IEP plans at a young age can also help students understand like their disability and give them a chance to learn activism at a young age. And number 4 is to be more inclusive of disability in school communities. I find that people with disabilities are so often excluded, put into special ed departments, maybe on a floor or in a classroom that's completely isolated from everyone else, because they're labeled as different, which in turn creates a system where able-bodied students don't really know what having a disability is really like. They just think that students with disabilities are the ones in that classroom who are just separated from them and therefore like less than them or like less capable than them. So I think that having a curriculum where students with disabilities and able-bodied students can work together and can understand each other could be really beneficial. So there are a lot of issues that surrounding disabilities that are starting in schools at a young age, but those are the few top ones that I can think of.
I really liked your answer on this particular issue because it'll really help schools really open up to this sort of an issue and be sensitive about it. And that brings me also this question that we usually don't know how do we tackle this thing, or we don't know how can we on an individual level how can we spread awareness about this. And it's actually a very sensitive topic, but what happens is people just get awkward around the situation. They don't know how to react. Either they are really bad bullies, or sometimes they're very, or they can become a little too sensitive. That might make the whole situation awkward. So how can people be change their ways so that people with disabilities can feel welcomed and they can feel like they're part of the community?
I think the key thing to do is to, number one, treat people with disabilities just like everyone else, no matter what, no matter their ability level, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they have a developmental disability, whether they can't communicate in a normal way. Don't baby them, don't talk down to them, don't ignore them. Treat them just like you would a friend or a classmate. And number 2 is to listen to people with disabilities. I had a friend last year who, when she first met me, she said that she didn't know anything about disability rights issues, but then as she got to know me, she learned a lot more about what people with disabilities go through and why that's so wrong, even though it's super normalized. So I think that what you need to do when you talk to people with disabilities as like an acquaintance or as a stranger is to just treat them like a person, but then as you get to know them, make an effort to learn the issues that they go through and make an effort to learn that about disability rights and how to be an advocate for people with disabilities.
I think what do you say when this whole comparison situation arises, a sort of divide is going to be created, and I think that's going to severely impact both people who are disabled and those who are able. Because I mean, we don't want those kind of people in the country, right? I mean, you're feeding them the false narratives, and towards the end, it's just bad. It's violating everyone's rights, right? Now, when I really thought about what you said right now, I feel like certain schools, once they see a disabled student, either they just do not, they completely discard them or ignore them, or they tell them that we don't want to handle you, you should go to private school and all that. Because I've seen that happen in some places, and I mean, how do you think that can be dealt with? Because that seems really inhumane to me, because they just want an education. Why would you kick them out? How do you deal with that, and how do you address certain issues, these kind of issues?
It's happened to me before. I've had people who, when I call out the issues that the special ed department has in schools, they've told me to just go to a private school if I want more support. And I think that's super detrimental, because it's basically telling students with disabilities that if you don't like the system that we're giving you, if you don't like the supports we're putting in place, then you just move. We don't want to accommodate you. But in reality, that's super detrimental, because the system that you're putting in place were not approved by people with disabilities. They were approved by parents or like staff who thought that it might help people with disabilities. So when people with disabilities say, no, we don't like this, you need to change the system. You need to add precautions that disabled people want from you. That's very important. And I think another very important point is you need to get rid of the narrative that people with disabilities are like less capable or less able when you're, especially in special ed departments. So don't try to be authoritarian, don't talk down to them, and teach them their options in life. Teach them that they can be more than just someone selling sandwiches in a sandwich shop or like homebound, having their parents take care of them. Teach them that they can go to college, they can find jobs, they can find accommodations, they can have different forms of transportation. Teach them ways that they can live a life just like everyone else and that they can be independent, as opposed to just teaching them that their options are very limited and they have to be excluded from everyone else.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. I really liked your answer on that. So I just wanted to ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, what do you have in store? What are you planning, and where do you see yourself?
That's a good question. I see myself in 5 years, hopefully going to a college that I like. Hopefully having a major that I'm really passionate about and that can help me continue my activism. I'm not sure what that is just yet, but I think that's going to develop as I go to college. And continuing my activism, continuing to have a platform where I can speak my voice and be a public speaker, continue to write and publish things, learn more about the issues that people with disabilities go through, and help raise their voices, to just be more educated and continue to have a platform on my true goals.
I think knowing that you have a voice is not enough. You just because you know it and people choose to stay quiet. And I'm a public speaker, and I feel like that's something you should not do. And as an activist, I think you would agree. If you have a voice, please use it. Sign the petition, go for the rally, support the movement, and I think that's what really matters at the end. Not saying, "Oh, I wish life was better." So I think taking an actionable step towards change is the right way forward. And well, you talked about college, right? And I think this is something a lot of viewers would like to know. What subject? What are you planning to major in college? Have you made any plans? What are you planning in that stage?
I'm not totally sure yet. I know that common majors for activists are journalism, law, political science, and human rights. But I'm not sure where exactly I plan to go from. Right now, I'm considering a law major, a legal major. But I can't guarantee that for certain because I'm not completely sure. That's still developing as I go to college and things.
Wow, I think that's something everyone who's applying to college has to decide. So good luck with that, Melissa. I think with that, it's been a really great honor to have you here, Melissa. It's been fun talking to you, and I think Aisha would agree as well. Aisha, a few words maybe?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was very inspiring to see you do so many things at such a young age. And I'm sure that there's a lot that's coming your way, and there's going to be great things, and you're going to do great in life because you inspire and you are this advocate that we really need. And you help girls have a voice, you help girls have representation. And I feel that goes a long way because it's all about what you put out there. It's definitely going to come back to you. And I wish all the support in the world for you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. It was great having a chance to talk with you.
Thank you. And with that, we end this episode. Thank you, everyone.